And Erin Delmore, senior political correspondent for Bustle, is in our studio to talk more about the situation in North Korea, as well as some of the president's political battles at home. Erin, good to see you. I want to get to the really important North Korea nuclear issue, but I want to start with some of these battles at home. And we thought Twitter feuds were just between pop stars, right? So we're seeing a Twitter feud between the president and, of course, the majority leader of the House, Mitch McConnell, the most powerful Republican in Washington, short of the president. Why is this happening, and is this strategic on the part of President Trump?
That's the question that not only people closely watching the president, but also his advisors and the colleagues from his party in the Senate are asking as well. Now, this is a tactic we've seen from the president over and over again. If somebody doesn't meet his expectations, doesn't hold up to the position he's put them in, he calls them out for it. That's his style. He's a businessman. He's a real estate mogul, and he is the businessman in chief of the United States.
But the thing is, Congress doesn't work for the president.
You know, I've asked senators about this a couple of times now. I've talked to Republicans and Democrats, and I've said, how do you feel here? Is there a sense that everybody is working to move the ball down the field, or is there more of an us versus them? And senators have told me Donald Trump sees himself as a part, that is, a separate part of the Republican Party, that he stands alone. It is their job to carry out his agenda, and when they fail, it's a poor reflection on them, not the party as a whole.
That's interesting. Let's talk about the agenda, right? For the most part, they have the same agenda. They want tax reform. They wanted repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which didn't happen.
Right.
Is this a way for the president to say, if Congress doesn't pass the next big item on my legislative agenda, tax reform, debt ceiling, what have you, I will then shift the blame to Congress? Is that part of the game here?
I think Congress might wish that was part of the game. He wants to go back and talk about health care again. And right now, Republicans on the Hill want to get as far away from that conversation as possible. That was a bruising legislative season in July for the Senate and in March for the House. They want to move off this topic. Now, you see some hardline conservatives who say, let's get a repeal, even if we have
Freedom
to wait.
Caucus
The
still
Freedom
asking
Caucus.
for a majority of signatures. Will they get that?
Exactly. That's unlikely. The numbers bear that out. It makes it unlikely. But the Senate doesn't want to see a version of this bill again. That's been made clear by Mitch McConnell. Now, the president's other priorities, moving to tax reform, moving to a large-scale infrastructure bill, yes, he wants to see it. So do Republicans. Remember, this administration has yet to notch a major win. That's what Donald Trump is looking for.
It's not only McConnell that Trump is going after. He is also going after, and pro-Trump PACs are going after Republican incumbents in primary challenges now. So we're talking about guys like Jeff Flake in Arizona, who is now facing a challenge from somebody that is being supported by a pro-Trump PAC. Is this a party that is at war with itself? And if that is the case, how is it going to pass things like tax reform?
Donald Trump has his agenda. To get his agenda through, he needs people on his side. And he has seen some moderate Republicans, some establishment Republicans come forward and say, we don't think that's the best way. We saw this in health care. They didn't endorse a straight up repeal and replace. They didn't even endorse a straight up repeal. We've seen it on immigration. Remember, the Gang of Eight did not advance this idea of only permitting people into the country who showed an exceptional level of skills or English language ability.
And they don't look likely to adopt his merit-based immigration plan in Congress either.
They don't, and of course that would irk the White House. So now if you have a Republican in office, but you can get a challenger in there, you can give that person some support, that's an enticing deal. Look at Dean Heller in Nevada. He is somebody who had a hard time swallowing that pill of health care reform, ushering in Trump care in place of Obamacare, for a lot of reasons. The Medicaid expansion was a boon to Nevada.
Right.
It's something that they needed. So he was in a hard spot there, and Donald Trump took him out publicly and said, which side is he going to fall on?
That's going to be a really interesting re-election campaign to look at. It's going to be perhaps a referendum on how voters and constituents actually feel. How strongly do they feel about repealing Obamacare?
You know, that's the thing about Obamacare. Over the last 6 years, 7 years, parts of it have become very popular. This idea that you can't be discriminated against for a pre-existing condition, this idea that you can stay on your parents' health insurance up through part of your mid-20s, those are parts that became very popular that are now hard to do without. That's what Republicans are facing when they go back home to their constituents.
Yeah. Let's talk about foreign policy for a bit. The president thanked Vladimir Putin for kicking out hundreds of State Department employees from Russia. The White House now says the president was being sarcastic. He's still getting a lot of heat. Is Russia still a blind spot for the Trump administration?
That's their worry. Now that the Trump administration is under what the president has called a cloud of these Russia allegations, they don't want to appear too cozy or blinded by Russia.
But he does appear cozy when he says, thank you for kicking out my diplomats.
And then he comes back and he says it was a joke. Now, I've been looking at reaction today from Congress members, and they've been siding with the president. They've been saying, oh, he was being flip. It was a joke. There's a question here. Is this a hardball tactic from the president, or does this display how little value the president, the commander-in-chief, America's chief diplomat, chief representative, the value that he sees in diplomacy?
Yeah.
Now, Stephanie, if you think back to his first trip, he showed up in different parts of the country. He has actually made a large number of foreign visits for the first 200 days of his presidency. But what he doesn't do is entrust these decisions only to the diplomats. He wants to see a military solution. He wants to see a blueprint from his generals.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily know that he's going to take the military option. We do know that he tweets a lot about the strength of our military, and that brings us back to North Korea. His tweets about modernizing, his tweets about being locked and loaded, all this focus on militarization versus diplomacy, as you point out. Is that how he really thinks, or is that part of his branding as a strong man in the White House?
There's an axiom in politics and in reporting: measure people by the actions they take and not the words they say.
Right.
Our worry right now, the worry in the international community, the worry for people who are focused on what the U.S. will do next in regards to North Korea, hinges on the president's words. His words are tough. He's a tough-talking guy. Now, if you look at Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, his words are much more measured. He has a sobering influence on the White House. But we have not seen U.S. policy strategically shift toward North Korea. It's the actions we're looking for here.
Yeah, absolutely. Erin Delmore, thanks so much. Good to have you.
Thank you.